Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Brittany Chisnall with the Freightwaves Media Team, and I'm happy to present this webinar in partnership with Werner Enterprises. Today, we will discuss gearing up for 2025 and how dedicated freight solutions can transform your freight shipping. I'm happy to be joined by Eric Downing, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at Werner Enterprises, and Grace Sharkey, author and industry expert at Freightwaves. We will also have a Q&A following this discussion, so please make sure to have your questions ready for our presenters. Before we get started, I'd like to cover just a couple of housekeeping items. First, if you have any issues during the webinar, please feel free to access the help section or the audience chat function in your webinar console. If you have questions that you'd like to ask our presenters, please enter those through the Q&A box in your console at any time during the presentation, and we will answer as many of those as possible during the audience Q&A following the discussion. We'll also be sending a link to the recording of this webinar tomorrow if you'd like to view it on demand or share it with your colleagues. At this point, I will go ahead and turn it over to Grace to kick off today's discussion.
Thank you so much, Brittany, and thank you to everyone who's joining us today. I'm very excited not only to have Eric here with us, but to really dive into dedicated freight solutions as a whole. We're seeing signs of a market turn here soon, and I'm sure we have shippers and everyone alike who's wondering, hey, what's coming down the line, and how do we prepare ourselves for different market conditions and make sure that, of course, at the end of the day, everything goes smooth and everything is delivered to our end consumer as well. So, with us, of course, is Eric. And Eric, I'd love to really just start off by touching on dedicated freight as a whole. What are some of the key trends that you've noticed throughout, especially 2024, driving into 2025? That's pushing more of this adoption of dedicated freight solutions for shippers.
Yeah, so here's the thing. I think it's different for every shipper. I think whatever they prioritize, what their needs are, is extremely important. Usually, service is king, right? So, what does that mean? Is it capacity related? Is it communication? Is it challenges they're seeing at their store level with their associates? But consistency and reliability are really important for our customers. Communication, I talked about. I mean, I've heard from customers that would say, "Hey, the reason why I need a dedicated solution is because I I've texted, I've called, I've emailed, I'm trying to find out where my freight's at, and I haven't had an answer in 24 hours or whatever it may be." And so, our job as a dedicated provider is, whether it's 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning, to be able to respond and answer and provide feedback to our customers. You think about what recently happened in this year with the hurricane, right? So what do we have a lot of customers that are trying to support their customers in that area. And so what are we able to do to provide capacity, whether it's trucks and trailers, servicing those markets? So are you providing solutions so they can react quickly, right? And do the right thing and down there. And then tech is like, what are you doing from a technology perspective, right? So and maybe not necessarily always state of the art, but leading in tech. Trying to take cost out for your customers and try to be more efficient, I think, is important. And then think about, and I know it's not just 24, but over the last 4 or 5, maybe 10 years, it kind of flies by as long as we've been in this industry. But think about e-commerce. It used to be customers said, "Hey, I want my product there in 48 hours or 24 hours, whatever it may be." And today, in some major cities, they're getting that product the same day. It could be within hours. So that product is way closer to their end consumers, and so that, I think, that just lends itself into dedicated. So it's I think it's a huge opportunity today and going forward as that process evolves, because customers, I can't imagine that that's going to change, and people are going to want their stuff even faster.
Yeah, I definitely don't think it's going to change. And I'd be as a maybe young. I like to pretend I'm in the Gen Z catalog when I'm barely there, but it's interesting because you're 100% right. Like it's for all the supply chain nerds out there, it's exciting because we've now become the selling point, right? How
Yeah.
fast can we get our goods to our doorstep or to our vendors? And you're absolutely right that sometimes even for myself, when I go purchase an item, if I can't pick it up in store today, you might lose that purchase from me. And it's great for all of us here in logistics, right? Because it means we matter more than
Yeah.
ever. But that's a even bigger commitment that we have to make as well. And I love all the aspects you touched on in the tech side. We'll get into all of that today for those watching as well. But You did touch on kind of the buyer changes, right? The e-commerce aspect of things. But I'm also interested in just the economy in general as well. How have you seen the economic climate in particular push for the demand for more of these dedicated services, and what aspects of the economy do you feel like might be driving that?
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, after COVID, 23 and 24 have not been the strongest freight market. I think we all know that. But that isn't it hasn't taken away from the need for dedicated capacity. I mean, again, I talked about why customers need that, but I think we're already seeing. I mean, I think our CEO has shared that our peak is more robust than in the prior couple of years. So we're seeing capacity tighten. We're seeing customers growing their dedicated fleets and bringing some of that capacity back. And so literally, it's like how does your network support your customers' needs? Because again, their needs are constantly evolving. And so, and here's the thing, they're battling inflation. We know what's happened with inflation over the last few years. And so what can you do from a dedicated perspective to take volatility out of their process, right? And be prepared and evolve. And that means different things to different customers. But from an economics perspective, I'm excited about 25. I mean, I took over as COO in the beginning of 23, coming down from, what most carriers and logistics providers saw in COVID years. And so, I mean, you got to be nimble. You got to be flexible to adapt to your customers' ever changing needs because they're on a budget, right? They don't like
Mhm.
surprises, and so the more that you can take out of that process and be more consistent and predictable for them, the better.
Yeah. Again, we'll get into some of these topics a little bit deeper throughout this chat, but I think it sounds like, especially from the first answer, you've started or have been making those investments over the past couple of years. So I think now, right, that that commitment is now being pointed to, right, for those shippers out there looking for a strong partnership. Werner's right there, ready to roll after all of that work that they put together over these last couple of years. And but maybe for those out there watching who might not understand the importance of dedicated services, can you maybe showcase some of the advantages of dedicated service offerings for companies in particular, especially you touched on it a little bit, but it's simplifying
Yeah.
and putting it all into one person, or what does that mean for the overall companies that you work for?
Yeah, so if you think about it, what you want to be able to do is let them focus on what they believe provides value for their organization, and then let the dedicated provider do what they do best, right? So whatever it is in their supply chain, so you can focus on that and let them feel good about that, and they can focus on other things that are going to help in their supply chain make things easier. It goes back to what are your challenges? Is it capacity? Is it during the peak season? Do I have a plan? Do I have volatility that I can't cover? Is it scheduling? Is it predictability? Is it, for example, I mean, everybody wants to be environmentally friendly, and so what can you do to optimize your solution to reduce miles or even reduce number of stops and loads we have? Is it through specialized equipment? So just sitting down with your customers and asking them, what do you need? And then being able to provide those solutions. And so they can focus on other things. And, you provide value, you're going to be sticky, you're going to be there a long time. And then I think it all boils down to customer satisfaction. And I don't just mean external customers. I mean, and those internal customers are important. So a lot of times with what we do, truck day is not always the most favorite day, the happy day for a store employee that's out there working and trying to offload product, get the shelves filled, and so they don't have X outs and they take care of their customers. If they have a good experience, right? And so you have dedicated drivers that know their business, they understand it, they care about it. So they're having a better experience, and then they're going to carry that forward to their customers, and that's good. I think that helps sales and helps the morale in the total company.
Definitely, and I mean, you touched on this earlier, and it's funny because I was talking to someone just the other day, and it's this peak season is when they said it's a peak year peak season, which I thought was a funny way to explain some of the demand that we're seeing a little bit more, and this time of the year than we've maybe seen in the past couple of years in particular. And with that though, right, this unexpected peak year, peak season, it means you need to be flexible. And so I'm interested in that aspect of things. Like, how does a dedicated provider keep itself nimble for that flexibility of what your customers are expecting when it comes to inventory levels and demand from its customers? And how do you flex with them to make sure that that standard that you've just touched on, that you've said, of course, is followed through? Especially, I mean, Santa Claus can't be late, right? So how do you make sure that all happens?
Yeah. No, I totally understand, and I think it starts with understanding your customer's business. Like, they have shipping data, they have historical patterns, they know what their peaks are like, so, getting in and learning that business and listening to them is first and foremost. And then I think capability, I mean, I'm gonna throw this out, capability matters. So at the end of the day, density, if you're a large dedicated provider and you have multiple fleets in different areas that honestly peak at different times, not everybody peaks at the same time, and so you can leverage that capacity. And then also having other solutions like One Way and our logistics groups, that they can provide solutions as well. So it is truly about being nimble, because it's not only on the upside, on the downside, right? So what can you do to meet your customers where they're at and support them? So because they got to get that product out, they try to live within a budget. They want to understand what those costs are, and being nimble in that area is really important. And I think that's one of the things that at Werner that we do really well, is that flexibility, that nimbleness. Because we do a lot of retail, and home improvement, things like that, and so they are very,
Yeah.
very peaky. They're very spiky, and so you got. I mean, if you're going to do that well, you're going to stay with customers a long period of time. You gotta own that. You got to be part of that solution.
Oh, definitely. Peaky, spiky, we've got all the E's, this, wonderful
We do.
webinar today. So and just a reminder for our audience, of course, make sure you leave your questions. If there are any questions that we don't get to today, of course, we'll provide those to Warner. They'll reach out to you directly. So, I'll ask all the dumb questions. Don't even worry about any of yours. There is no dumb question in a Freightwaves webinar. We're all a bunch of freight nerds here, and we're happy to answer anything that you have, and especially in this topic in particular. I know one that has come up frequently is, how do companies make the choice of choosing a dedicated partner? What is Werner doing to maybe prove themselves, their capabilities, and those that are watching today, if they're looking at more of focusing more on dedicated services, what advice would you give them in having those conversations?
Yeah. So it depends where you start. So if you don't have a dedicated fleet, this is a small world. Transportation logistics is a small world. So I'm guessing, though, if you don't, somebody you have a relationship, or somebody that you've worked with in the past that does. Reaching out to them to understand what dedicated is and what it is not is a good way to start. Pros and cons, like why, and then why do I what challenge do I have that I want to solve? What would a dedicated fleet provide for me? Right? Is it service? Is it capacity? Is it just stability and pricing and different things? And so I can budget better. Those are the things that you want to ask yourselves. Why choose a dedicated fleet? And then I think, again, it goes back to choose your partner wisely, because you're hopefully signing up for a long-term commitment for both, right? For both the carrier, the provider, and the customer. And that's how you get better, because you're constantly doing reviews and business reviews, to get better and constantly evolve and improve. And our job is, to be sticky, is to drive improvement, to drive costs out, to be more efficient. And the only way you do that is in understanding their business. But I mean, all the things we've talked about, if you're be careful when you choose that dedicated provider, that they are committed to your business, and they want to make your business better, right? And so that
Yeah.
makes, our customer, that makes your life a heck of a lot easier.
Well, on that note, I'm wondering if you could dive into some of the investments that Werner's made to make sure that their dedicated freight solutions are as impactful as they have been over the last couple of years. You touched on, right. We've seen some interesting dynamics in the freight world, and being a leader in this space too. I mean, who doesn't know Werner, right? What investments have you made, or partnerships as well? Whether it's technology, whether it's warehouses, whether it's assets, what have you made in order to make sure that you can follow through, and that flexibility aspect as well is available to customers?
Yeah, I think so. The first thing you said, technology is key. Are you? And again, I don't necessarily have to be on the bleeding edge, but definitely need to be on the front end, so you're providing customers value. But whether it's a TMS solution, whether it's optimization, whether it's visibility, I mean, customers need real time visibility where their product's at, so reporting and dashboards. I wish every customer wanted the same KPIs. but they don't. I think we all know that, right? You better have a suite of things, and you need to be nimble and quick with it, right? So you're in the bid process, and then I think specialized equipment. You need to be able to be able to procure those things quickly, and then have plans to flex up and down. But I think that's all of the above. I mean, one of the big things for me is like from the standpoint of optimization, and it's not just load optimization. It's not just taking miles out, but it's also, are you helping them make sure that if they have challenges with cube, right, or weighing out of trailers and doing all those things? Because the best way to reduce costs and be efficient is, can you consolidate and not ship those extra loads, right? So if you bring a lightweight spec trailer in and you can consolidate, you can haul heavier freight. How does that help those specific customers? So I think it's all the above. It's technology, it's training for your people, it's collaboration with the customer. It truly is caring about their business, and because many of our drivers, they feel like I'm not gonna name a customer, but they feel like they're part of that customer's business, right? So they do truly have complete ownership, and a lot of times they go to the same stores at the same time. They know those people, so there's a ton of efficiency gains in that process.
Well, it's interesting that you touched on the KPIs are all different for individuals because they quite are, and I that could, there's a number of reasons for that. I think, right, one, when you're working with different just markets in particular, different products, that's bound to happen. And I'm sure there's some larger shippers that are a little bit more, I don't want to say needy, but have special requirements,
Yeah.
right, that they have to touch on. You talked about sustainability, right? There's going to be some customers that focus on that. There's going to be maybe other smaller ones that aren't as concerned there. How have you built up your staff and your internal processes in order to provide that? Because I know, as someone who's like been a part of a growing like technology department, that can be hard to do. So how has Werner built that up?
Well, that's a great one. What we know is one size doesn't fit all.
Yeah.
Right, so every customers' needs and demands in what they need to run their business are different. So you like you said, I mean, it's not just tech. I mean, you think about, to be successful, do you what how responsive is your sales team? You think about maintenance. You think, right? I mean, what's the uptime on your equipment? You think about from the standpoint of recruiting. Are you able to have put drivers in the seats when they need it, when they ebb and flow and they grow? So it's like in all of the above thing. And so it's our pricing and our modeling team, engineering team. You better have a state of the art engineering team with really good technology, right? That can model their customers' business. Because let's be honest, their networks aren't static. Those networks change all the time. So you got to be willing and able to move with them and evolve. My prior boss said, if you don't evolve as they evolve, right, you're gonna get passed by, and you're gonna be a relic, and you're not gonna be able to support them and grow with their business. So I think it's important. Not, I kind of think not even just evolving with them, but being a step ahead as much as you can, in this industry is really important. But it takes all of those people working together. It's not just the operations folks in the front lines that are working hand in hand with the customer. It's all of the support groups that are making sure that everything's taken care of, that customers don't even see, right? That you have to have as a well-oiled machine.
Love that. It's uh, I agree with you on the technology aspect. I think I saw someone where AI, where someone had said,
Mm.
it's not a tool that's going to take your job. It's just someone who uses that tool, right, will end up taking your job. And I think in this scenario, right, if you're not investing in those tools, and someone's going to steal that business, someone who's using those tools are going to steal that business as well. And that's, it's interesting because as we see a lot of these trends and seeing the markets starting to turn, I always I get excited, right? Because I'm happy for it, but I also know that with that comes, of course, changes and capacity networks for shippers, and a lot of cash flow and
Yeah.
financial changes that will come with that too. So it's interesting, looking at more dedicated service, like you said, that no matter where the market is or how it's turning, that outcome will not change with it either, which I think is huge. I'd love to hear your thoughts, like just looking at the past couple of years and the market conditions you're seeing, and what you've heard from shippers. Are you seeing this trend too? Are they prepping for a different economy in
Yeah.
2025?
Yeah, it's a great question, and what I would say is you see it first in the bids that come in. Our
True.
bid
Yeah.
activity is off the charts strong, so that there's something going on there, right? I mean, that's the you because we everybody measures that, so I think that's the
Yeah.
first thing. And so when people start getting more concerned about capacity, and supporting their customers, and by the way, probably for them, are they investing more? They think the market's going to turn and improve. So what does their investment look like? How many stores are they going to open, or DCs or warehouses? And where do I make sure I lock that down? So many of our customers are they're getting so much better about being ahead of that, like saying, "Hey, I'm looking at a network, and this is what I need," and then so they're putting those RFPs out. Sometimes we see them 2 years in advance, which is really hard to do. But I mean, that tells you how far ahead they're planning. So
True.
I think that I mean, what we're seeing is that I don't want to say it's doubled, but activities picked up. Also,
Yeah.
the decisions that happen sooner or faster when the market's heating up a little bit. Sometimes you get dedicated requests for pricing or whatever it may be for modeling, and it may take a long time before they provide an answer response or make a change, or they're just testing the waters on price. But when the market starts warming up, those decisions seem to come faster, and they're moving away from because when the market turned, dedicated, that two things happen. A is like some like this is not what we do, but some people who provide dedicated capacity, really it's one way capacity they're providing with a dedicated solution to provide service. We want the stuff that's hard to do, that's real, true, dedicated, regardless of the market. But that doesn't mean those fleet sizes won't ebb and flow based on what customers sell and
True.
whatnot. So again, I think you're seeing more bids, faster decision making. Customers are really asking good questions, right? And so I think you see all those things, and that points to the market is changing. Now, I wish it was changing faster, right? Because we've lived in a pretty interesting world for the last 2 years, to say the least. And not just us, customers are having the same challenges we are. Because usually, this is what customers talk to me about. Usually in the past, when market's soft, customers usually, I don't want to say win, but they have an advantage. And when the market's really
Yeah.
hot, carriers do. I don't know if anybody has really won over the last 2 years or had an advantage in that process.
Yeah, it's, I think times are changing, that's for
Yeah.
sure, and I think, 25 is gonna have a wonderful outlook, and I'm happy to hear that you're seeing that uptick as well, and that, shippers are responding to those changes too. I am interested though, of course, we lately discussed the diverse, industries that you work with. Could you maybe elaborate on the different, industries in particular that you feel like Werner's excel in, and maybe how dedicated services flex between different industries, what they're
Yeah.
asking for of Werner, is that changing, within their dedicated freight aspect as well?
Yeah, I mean, dedicated initially used to be a lot of retail. I mean, it was just heavy
True.
retail, and a lot of it was driven by capacity, right? I need capacity during peak season, and the volatility in pricing in in the fourth quarter, whatever season that you peak in is, you again, they live on a budget. They don't like surprises. It's Christmas for us, and our kids like surprises. They do not, and I don't
Yeah.
blame them, right?
Yeah.
So it's from that perspective, that's what you're trying to provide. But you get into different industries. So retail was probably the start, but then you get into home improvement, you get into industrial. You think about, I mean, for us, big and heavy stuff that we do, which is really sensitive. And you're going into customers through houses and thresholds, doing some type of white glove deliveries. But again, it's really diversified. And in this type of equipment, it used to be, hey, everybody provided a standard 48 or 53-foot trailer. Um, that's pretty diverse, and that's changed a lot. And then
Well,
flatbed, right? So flatbed and temperature control used to be mostly one-way fleets, but customers have learned, hey, that's a great way for me to help control costs and mitigate, volatility in my business. So I mean, you name the type of equipment, the type of delivery, but usually if it's hard to do, it's multi-stop. It's really sensitive for my customer, and I got to make sure the right people are showing up at the right time. Because at the end of the day, our drivers are a reflection of our customers
yeah.
in many cases. So you got to make sure that in those situations, you want a good partner that's going to put really professional people that care about your business in those positions.
Do you feel that, for the driving aspect of this, do you feel like drivers, who, are at least working for the dedicated freight aspect of Werner, find that this solution leads to better outcome for their work as well?
Yeah, I think it depends on the driver, right? Some drivers
Yeah.
like to be out and stay out 2 weeks at a time or whatever it may be, so
Yeah.
it's really up to the driver, but yeah, I here's the thing, I think, I mean, like I think you said millennial, I'm not a millennial, a little older than that, but I think things have changed. People wanna be home more often. They wanna see their kids' sports. They wanna do all these different things, and they wanna be more involved.
True.
And so dedicated is a big deal for that. I mean, so we have dedicated fleets that, and that are home daily or home multiple times per week, our shift work, and so that gives people that optionality to, like, do diff to have a different job, and not only that, but you can you can stay within a company, and there's, hundreds of different jobs that you can move to, so it's not just I haul flatbed or TC or whatever it may be, so I think it's huge for drivers. I think you get a heck of a lot better retention over time if you give them choices. So if they want to start out running one way or team or do whatever that they do, and then, hey, I want to go do dedicated for this customer, but then in that region, because of the density, I could do many other things. And so I think that's important to them as well. I'm into our customers. I mean, let's be honest, an experienced driver for our customers is huge. It's a game changer, it's a differentiator. If you want to reduce costs and you want to deliver safely and you want to have a good customer experience, experienced drivers are really important.
Yeah. I love to hear that. We all but here at Freightways, we love to hear drivers are being taken care of. So
Yeah,
that's and I'm sure shippers want the same thing too.
yeah,
You mentioned that. Like they want to see the same face coming in, and knowing, right, that there's not gonna be any hiccups, especially dependent on the facilities, and then you mentioned, like, something more industrial, right, compared to retail might be one of those, you have to take kind of a weird road around the facility that, having to teach a different driver over and over again can be bothersome as
yeah,
well, so
yeah,
having one person and just a familiar face that gets we always talk about in this industry, like, there's the human aspect of it, and I think when it comes to that product getting to where it needs to get, seeing a familiar face with your product, right? I'm sure customers feel more secure, at least with their freight, especially with so many fraud situations and stolen trailers, etc., right? Like seeing that familiar face, I'm sure makes them feel a little bit more secure.
yeah. I mean, let's be honest. Werner was started by a driver.
For
I
yeah.
mean, they're all the way through our company. I mean, we know that this industry is built on drivers, and drivers are the face of us and to our customers. And so, yeah, I mean, every single aspect that we do today and our customers as well. I mean, they're way more open than they used to be 10 years ago to like, how are your drivers? Like, how can we help it? Because I
Well,
want to be a customer of choice for your driver. And I
true.
want them to want to come back. So what amenities can I do? What are the things that I can do to really help on that area? So I mean, like I said, it it's a two-way communication. It's treating people like you want to be treated, and it's not just us that do it. It's our in almost all cases, our customers, especially on the dedicated side, are fully bought into that because they know what that means to them upstream with their own associates when they interact.
Yeah. If there's any shippers watching right now, bathrooms, bathrooms, bathrooms. I would start with that one. And fresh water.
Yeah.
That one is
Yeah.
probably a good one too, right? So,
Well, some parking spaces and some make
yes.
right and some things like that. Yep. Yep.
Yes. There's no issue with being a slower loader or unloader. It's just how you treat everyone when they're
Yeah.
there. So I'm all for it, and we're learning all the lessons here today as well. Now, I want to get back into dedicated freight services a little bit more. You've clearly have worked with a number of really incredible shippers in particular. I'm wondering if you have any interesting case studies or examples of, bringing on a client who hasn't had dedicated service or maybe has and hasn't had best experience. And that transformation working with Werner, what was that like and the outcome of that too?
Yeah, so I gotta be really careful here because it's a national, customer of ours
For
and
sure.
long-term relationship, so I always wanna say the name because 'cause I'm really proud of
Yeah.
that the relationship and how long it's been and again, and so you gotta provide value for that, but, let's just say if, I'll use a few years ago, so I don't really time it, but again, thousands of stores, lack of visibility, service was, let's say, 70 some percent, really frustration in those
Wow.
stores, morale might have been low, way more capacity in a fleet than they needed because, right, they just didn't have an understanding of the supply chain, and so they were just looking for help, and they said, "Hey, come in here and talk to us about what a dedicated, solution may look like." And so we sat down, we got to understand their business, right? And they had a bunch of restricted stores, so it wasn't I mean, they so about delivery wasn't easy, multi-stop, a lot of things going on there. a lot of driver retention challenges, and said, okay, let's take a look at this and see what we can do. And so in a matter of months, we were able to provide a solution, bring in capacity with dedicated drivers who learn their business. And so service went up, uh, lack of shrink and damage, those things went in the right direction. Their store associates were way happier. And then we were able to take a ton of capacity out. They had a bunch of capacity that was, I don't know what they were doing. They were running between distribution centers. And so that we were able to pull it out and their actual cost went down. So they got
Wow.
better service. They got, I think, a better relationship with their stores. Because again, I mean, our side of it's only a part of their business, right? Distribution, selling is the most important, but distribution's huge, and the relationship with the stores and their experience is huge. And so I think that was the biggest thing is like all of a sudden cut stores because think about this, if labor is a big deal, labor is a huge cost. And if you're not delivering on time to those locations and they're scheduling labor to offload trailers or stock shelves and you're not there when you're supposed to be there, that blows out their budgets and that doesn't make for a great relationship. So we were able to improve that whole process and we've been doing business with them for a long period of time. Now that doesn't mean that you take their business for granted. You got to constantly evolve. You got to constantly get better. And that's when you're a dedicated provider, you better be doing QBRs. You better be talking about how you can improve your business with them all the time. Because if you don't, somebody else will.
Yeah, it's interesting. You touched on like the impact of the stores that you're delivering to, and it's I just remember having a customer in the past, and it was kind of the opposite. The vendor was happy with the service we were providing, which led to a better relationship between the two of them and better pricing between the two of them as well. And I'm interested if there's any other kind of like smaller I don't want to say smaller impacts, but maybe hidden impacts that come with dedicated freight services, things like that that people aren't considering that could help with their overall supply chain, but also just even with the network that they're working with.
Yeah.
What have you seen as outcomes that people, because I think, yeah, getting things better there on time is huge. Clearly, cost is a big one, but what are maybe some of these smaller attributes that people aren't considering when they're looking at dedicated freight services?
Well, I mean, small is different to everybody. I get so
Yeah,
I don't really know how to gauge whether it's small or not because it depends on
yeah,
what they think is important.
for
But
sure.
some of the things that people don't think about, like when we look at somebody's network, how many times do you see freight crossing? Like, for example, you have a truck going one way that you're paying for, and then you got freight coming back. And if you were able to merge those two, we call it backhaul, but revenue
Yeah.
share, eliminating those empty miles and all those different things, that's huge. And then also if you're in supply chain and you're on the transportation side and you're constantly worrying about whether my freight's going to deliver on time and right because that stuff you just want to hopefully take that for granted that gets done in most cases. And so I think having a dedicated provider gives you that like a little bit of minds at ease that hey, this is getting done, and if it's not, somebody's going to tell me ahead of time so I don't all of a sudden get my boss or somebody calling me going, hey, where's this product at? Or I think it just if you think about the whole process from a dedicated perspective, it takes, I think, pain out. I mean, the bottom line is dedicated providers want to be easy to do business with,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yes.
that's the whole thing. Like, let's don't make it hard. Now the business is hard. A lot of times the process is hard, but let's make it as transparent as possible, seamless as possible, and be easy to do business with, and communicate. I just, again, I go back to it's the whole thing, and it's like I go back to customers. It really depends on what are the challenges, you big or small challenges, and then choosing that provider that can actually address those things, right? And because again, I don't want to use the word one trick pony. That's probably overused, but having a suite of solutions and capabilities is important because not one of my dedicated fleets that we have, and we have well over 150 of them, are the same. They're not the
Mm.
same. And so you got to, I mean, and we actually have, like, think about personalities. We put people who have different personalities with the right customers who have those personalities, right? So they mesh and it's better. It's all those little things
Really
about
good point.
that type of management.
That's a really, really good point. Um, Yeah, because when something goes wrong, you definitely wanna be talking with someone that you mesh good
Yeah.
personalities with, because something will happen, right? But it's having like you said, knowing that you're going to the same person that you trust, that knows it's your kid's birthday on Friday and
Yep.
that you don't need to be dealing with this because you
Yep.
got a big party, like, all of that stuff does add up. And especially, I think, in a culture in particular where we are even more so becoming this like work-life balance, having that ease of mind, I think is becoming more and more of a selling point. when it comes to who your provider is too. And you touched on this actually, I think maybe our audience members might not have caught it, but what you brought up too in terms of the backhauls, I think is a big part of the emissions and the fuel efficiency
Yeah.
that we discuss in this
Yep.
industry too. Can you tell us about how dedicated services provides that aspect? Because we discussed it a little bit earlier,
Yeah.
but I think that's becoming a more common trend of how do we as the biggest provider of emissions in this
Yeah.
world, how do we start to bring that down?
Yeah, and you can't get away from that, right? I mean,
No.
that's our business, and so what can you do to constantly improve that? Again, I think if you're a customer or you're a shipper, parting with a carrier that actually has environmentally friendly policies is huge. Like,
Yeah.
do you care? Like, what are you doing about it? Because I mean, a lot do, not all do. So here's the first thing that I would say if you're a shipper and you're selecting is and this doesn't get talked about enough is pick a fleet with newer equipment. I mean, the biggest you
Ah.
think about every
Mhm.
year that the improvements in the reduction of greenhouse gases and carbon and MPG is humongous. I mean, trucks 10 years ago were getting 5 miles to the gallon, and they're significantly better depending on what you get today. So that's huge. So that's number one, and that's on scale. Like if you need a lot of trucks and a lot of dynamic delivery process, that's the first thing you can do. And then it's also based on your business. Does your carrier look at alternative fuel solutions, right? And so there's a list of them. I'm not going to list them all, but you think about hydrogen and electric and carbon capture, right? And clean diesel and biodiesel, and the list goes on. I mean, there's hybrid trucks out there that you can choose. So all of those things are important, but it just depends on what fits your network. Right? Because I mean, today if you can't if you need to go 750 miles one way, you're not going to grab an electric truck to do that today, and that maybe in the future. But what other options do you have to do that? But again, I think it comes down to simply is aerodynamic trucks, lightweight spec equipment, just all the things. I mean, because we spend lots of time because on this topic. Because not only that, but you think about regulations in states that have different rules, and so you got. I mean, I don't know how small carriers. I feel for them in many cases how they keep up with the regulations, and I don't know if that's a question that comes up later, but
Yeah.
we have a team, and I spend I don't want to say too much of my time in that, but we spend a lot to make sure that we're meeting all of those regulatory needs. And again, I'm not saying it's wrong that they're putting them in. They're moving really fast, and
Yeah.
sometimes the tech's not even up to speed, and the tech's not even available to meet those expectations. But again, pick a provider that cares about the environment, that has policies that are leaning into it. And again, I think the easiest one is if you have new equipment, that's going to have the biggest impact. Trucks and trailers from an aerodynamic and fuel efficiency perspective, and all the tech that makes it a cleaner truck. That's the first thing you should do.
I love that, and, it's interesting you touched on, like, the some of the smaller, providers out there. I remember when and they took it away, but I think it's something that we'll see again in the future when the SEC was talking about having to report, like, Scope 3 emissions. Remember, like, a shiver down my spine
Yeah.
because I know for a fact as a broker at the time, like, we barely had the resources to even gauge that for ourselves, and let alone a small carrier that's doesn't have, of course, the wonderful resources that Werner has. I don't even know where they would start, let alone how they would be able to provide that and get down to scope 3
Yeah.
aspects of that as well. And I mean, I think that's like I said, I loved your expertise talking with these larger shippers, but I'm sure this is something that they're concerned with being regulated down the line to report on.
Yeah, absolutely. And so again, we have a team of people that are literally a sustainability team
Yeah.
that customers they call us or we reach out to them. So first of all, we let them know we have the service, and so what are the things that we can do to help them meet their expectations, right? That
Yeah.
especially things that are coming down the pipe. So yeah, we have that team that meets with them and talks to them about those things, and so uh, that's another thing that we can provide. It's tough on small carriers. I mean, you think about you have to have lawyers and you have to have like your maintenance people and people who procure equipment. You just go through the entire gamut, and you have to have a full team of people. That we have a government compliance person that we've hired, right, to stay on top of that and working with the different um, uh, trucking associations in states to make sure that you're on top of it. So it's really it's a growing and more challenging part of the business just to stay up to speed and make sure that you're staying compliant.
Yeah, definitely. And even to report on that goes into the technology aspect as well. And it's again, it goes back to the question of what to ask and what to make sure that your dedicated freight provider is looking into, I think, in the future too. And I'd like to talk about that as looking into 2025 and even down the line again 5 or so years. This industry moves so fast. I
Right.
almost don't even want to say 10
5 years.
years at this point because I don't even know 5 years could be what I think 10 years could be.
Yeah.
But looking down the line, and especially in your role, right? What are you focused on? What do you foresee being a part of the dedicated freight service in particular? How's that evolving over the next so many years?
You can't see off the side over here. I have a crystal ball. I just
Yeah,
I rub that and
I know
it's
I saw it in
right, right
reflection,
there.
so I figured I'd ask.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, it's a great question, and it's one that we constantly ask ourselves and challenge ourselves with. But I actually think it's so not to get into the tech weeds and the equipment weeds and all those things, but it's really what do your customers want? Like, what are their challenges? What are their needs? What are not today, but like what are you guys working on for the future? And then you gotta be having those conversations so you can develop your solution around what their needs are. Because it's not like you said, it's evolving so fast. It's not going to be the same as it was, right? I mean, so it's
Yeah,
they're also going after tech. They're also figuring out ways to reduce their costs, their emissions, all all the things we've talked about. And so being in lockstep with them and it is really important. So I go back to again the conversation about if you're not evolving and you're not, I mean, you've got to be so informed. There's so, I mean, you guys put out a ton of information. There's a lot of areas that you can lean into. Like, hey, these are the things that are coming. Whether it's think about Mexico, right, and what's going on there. You think about potential tariffs and all these things. Like, there's so much stuff that's happening. What about potential, union strikes that are going on in the ports on the East Coast? Like I know that's more near term, but that stuff also is going to potentially happen down the road in the future. So you
yeah,
got to be able to because customers are asking, "What? Hey, how can you help us in these areas? What if we're going to do this? What can you do to help get capacity or help deliver on time or help mitigate whatever those challenges are?" And so you got to have a team of really highly experienced people, not just in my operations team, but again, modeling, pricing, legal, equipment wise, it's the whole darn thing. I mean, it takes a, I guess a village, I guess is the thing. It takes a
yeah,
whole bunch of people to be able to meet that and understand that. I mean, again, uh, it's so critical. We have multiple meetings per week to talk about how this industry is going to evolve and what are we going to do to meet it head on, right? Because again, you can't just can't sit still. I mean, there was probably a period of time 15 years ago where people had like tech that was, let's just say the tech wasn't moving very, very fast. It was the same stuff, and customers weren't asking for a bunch of different solutions. It was kind of the same thing for a long period of time. And then, I don't want to pick a time for maybe 5, 7, 8 years ago. All of a sudden, it just took off, and like, hey, these are all the things that we expect, and so you got to get on board. You got to move, and you got to learn. And for me too, I'm going to give. I don't know if you guys know Dar Man. I'm going to give our CIO a plug. Probably shouldn't do this because he'll go to his head, and then we'd like to give each other a hard time. But really, when he's come on board and he's really looked at it, okay, so let's take where we are at today, and what can we implement to support our customers, and how quickly can we do that, and where, because let's be honest, trucking company, we don't have unlimited budgets either, and
yeah,
so we got to apply that medicine where it makes the most sense. And what's going to bring the most value for your customers so you can lean into that and then grow, right? So if we're winning business because you're doing the right things, you have the ability to grow. And so again, if he's heard me, he's got to be nice to me at least for the next couple weeks.
cut that, send that clip off to him on
Right.
accident. Let's just have it go into the email box for some reason. But I love that, and a follow up question on that. Especially in your role, being a big part of this organization, executive level, how do you build that culture within Werner to be constantly looking to evolve? I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
can be hard to get employees to buy into. How have you worked that culture in to make sure that that's showcased in the dedicated freight service you provide?
Yeah, I wish I could say it was easy, but
Yeah,
but
it's not.
I mean, is it change is hard, right? A lot of times
Yeah,
change is hard, but for Werner, I mean, it was a long period of time where we didn't have a lot of change. So, but I think our people were hungry. So that part of it is being hungry and willingness to hey, make my life easier, make it right. That's it. Like what's in it for me is huge. And then I think you have to build a team with your tech team, maybe a change management team that's in there helping bridge the gap between the tech and then your operators or whatever part of the business is evolving. So I think that's huge. It comes down to communication and letting people know, like, how is this going to benefit you, not just internally, but externally for your customers. I mean, I don't want to forget about that. But
Yeah.
here at Werner, our people have been really hungry for the change that we're seeing. I mean, we're on the biggest tech migration in our company's history. I don't know of a system that we're not in the process of upgrading, whether it's TMS or optimization or, anything back office, it's all being worked. And the good news is, I mean, it's been a lot of fun for the last couple of years, right? You guys know how that works.
Yeah.
But the light at the end of the tunnel's there. I think middle to end of 25, we're going to have a lot of this stuff come together. And I'm excited about what that means for us and for our customers.
Yeah. For our audience members out there, we've got a good about 10 minutes left here. So make sure that you enter in any of your questions so that, of course, we can get those to Werner and they can reply to you if we don't hit those all today. I love that answer too for our audience watching. We talked earlier about like, right, questions you should ask when looking for a dedicated provider. And that I think is a fair question, right? Is how do you build that culture? And Eric, it's really proud to hear that you've been able to pull that off. And especially you touched on the change management aspect. I think that's a huge piece of that. So again, for everyone out there, realize that's um, definitely going to be helpful for you and your process of onboarding with companies and just the flexibility aspect, right, of new technology they might be providing you, et cetera. So love that. Actually, let's check out a question that we have here for you as well. I think this is a good one in particular. Advice for transitioning to a dedicated freight solution. So you're used to kind of handling with a bunch of brokers,
Sure.
right? Maybe email lists, things like that. And talk about change management, right? What should companies be expecting when they move to dedicated freight solutions? What maybe internally their operations, how that could change, and maybe touch on the work that you do to, I would assume, to hopefully make that transition easier.
Yeah, a great question, and an important question because I mean, they may not know what to expect, but I think on the front end, the first thing is, your dedicated provider better be asking a lot of questions about your business, right? Because one thing that we fall trap into, I personally over 27 years started up hundreds of dedicated fleets, and I may think I know what's best, and may think I know how to implement this dedicated solution, but you better sit down and listen to your customer and find out what their pain points are, what they need solved for, right? And so I think you do that right, and I think that's the first step into having a good partnership and providing a solution. Um, that's one, and then I think it comes down to peace of mind for them, right? It's like the ease of doing business. Take away that volatility. I'm scrambling for carriers, or they don't have capacity, and my costs are fluctuating dramatically, right? No, but the CFO loves that when that happens, right? Within an organization, that there's not that they like a budget, they like to understand what those are. They even if there's like difference in pricing for peak seasons and whatnot, at least I can budget around it and I can understand it. Also, from a standpoint of pricing, if you have some type of escalator in there, you know what that is, right? And so you have a relationship and you take that volatility out. I mean, if you were in COVID and you were running a one-way fleet, there was versus a dedicated fleet, you probably saw significant changes in
Oh,
pricing immediately. So, and then I think about too is like you think about uh, by the way, there's a lot of really good providers in one way, but I think about from the standpoint if you have a group of drivers that know your customer's business, talk about taking headaches away, right? From stores calling and saying, "Hey, where's my product?" or "Hey, I didn't have a good experience." And then also you know who to call if they didn't, right? So at the end
yeah.
of the day, it's a continuous improvement process. So on the front end, ask a lot of questions, understand their business, listen, and then implement a solution that you have to work on continuous improvement. That's gonna be more efficient, more effective, drive cost out for them. And that, by the way, when I say cost, that doesn't just mean rate per mile. There's so many ways to drive cost out of your customer's business. And not even if you had been in there 5 or 6 or 7 years, there's ways to do it. And then it's just a matter of a collaboration. And so what I would also say is as a customer, you can't just do this. You can't wash your hands of the business. Hey, I've got a good provider. No, have those QBRs, challenge them, tell them what you want to improve, give them feedback so we know what to work on and get better. So take the guess out of it. I mean, our customers don't like surprises, neither do the carriers, right? I think
Yeah.
it's that two-way street communication is really important. Yeah.
Definitely, and it's the cost aspect that you touched on too, I think is super important to focus on because it's it could be even potentially eliminating accessorial costs that you've been paying for that were unnecessary or maybe certain situations where a truck orders not used, right? Because you
Yeah.
scheduling isn't done correctly and there's like it's so many different elements I think that can go into it once you choose this more focused approach towards your overall logistics. A dedicated freight option can lead to just even just optimization of your own operations. I think is a big one too. So we could probably spend the next 10 minutes just listing off those small
Yeah.
things. But I want to. This comes from one of the audience members as well. Twist it a little bit. What challenges do you see over the next few years, in particular, that could lead to changes in dedicated freight solutions? Or maybe you talked about Werner's constantly looking at the future. What are you anticipating that Werner's going to have to overcome and prepare for on the dedicated freight side?
Well, I mean, one thing, here's the thing, I think you guys know this, but I mean, the reason why we're talking about dedicated is because people are interested in dedicated. And so there's a lot of entrants that come in. Now, I mean, so it's just increased competitiveness. And so you got to continue to evolve and get better. So that's one thing is, there's a reason why people are gravitating towards dedicated, but you got to be able to do it well. And you got to be able to provide the things that we've talked about in this, hour long process. And my gosh, we could have touched on so many more things, right? We had to be really compressed. But again, what are the things that are going to change? I think that the thing is, there's certain areas that you think, that the expectations of our customers are going to constantly evolve and they want things sooner, or they're going to go somewhere else. Or you got to be good. You got to be on time
Yeah.
all the time and you got to deliver it safely. I mean, customers don't want to have, if you're not a safe carrier and you got product on the side of the road, not a good thing, right? Especially, I mean, if depending on who you're hauling for. So again, I think again, you got to continue to be reliable. You got to be you got to be not complacent, and you got to think about how you continue to evolve. And I think the biggest thing is people. This is a people business, and
Yeah.
so you got to have good people in all those roles and people that care. And you got to do that. You got to take care of them. And so I
Yeah.
think again, I mean, the most important thing is whether it's me or whoever it is in that process in the chain, is they have relationships with those customers at all those levels, and they know that we've got their back, and we're going to support their business. I think if you do that, I think whatever comes at you, they're going to you'll have some grace and some time to evolve and change. But if you don't, all of a sudden an RP goes out and bids are going out and whatnot. And so I think again, it matters about how you treat others, how you treat people, how strong is your relationship with your customer, and are you not complacent? Are you working continually on providing an improved solution? Again, it goes back to crystal ball. I wish I had one that worked all the time. But I think it's just literally, again, I'll go back, I'll give you guys a plug. It's like, hey, there's a lot of communication that's out there. You better pay attention. It's not just coming in the office or whatever job you have and sitting down and watching your piece of business. It's like, you better understand the entire environment because it's global. And so that stuff all matters. And so you got to listen, you got to watch, you got to be involved and engaged. So it's not just, hey, come to do your day job. You better be paying attention to everything else that's going on.
Well, I mean, here's my favorite thing about servicing shippers or even just working in logistics in industry in particular is that when you do your job well, that usually means that your customers are going to be getting more purchase orders, which means you're going to have to do even better. And it's just if you do well, scaling is right around the corner. And I would assume too, if you could touch on that as well, if you're a smaller shipper who's looking to grow or an e-commerce player and you're seeing growth as well, would you say a dedicated freight solutions is probably the best way for you to grow with that too?
Well, yeah, if you're new, and by the way, that experience to your customers that are coming to your business matters. So if all of a sudden they want their product, or they're thinking or the product's damaged, or when they get it, that stuff can be really, really tough on a new business, a startup business. So I think that matters. And by the way, as a dedicated provider, we win when our customer wins. So when they're winning and they're growing and let's be honest, they're making better margins or they take cost out, all that stuff is good for us, right? We're not separate of their business. We're part of their business. And yes, your CFO is going to say, "Hey, transportation's a cost, and nobody loves," but it's not something you can get around. So, how best can you provide solutions to make the supply chain people's lives a little bit easier? I think that's it. Again, all boats rise when you're working together. So it's not. It should never be us versus you or that type of thing in a dedicated solution. It's like literally we're working together. And if you're a new company, a startup company, really look at, and depending on what your needs are, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
really matters if it's, how dynamic, how diverse, how challenging is it? And then because a dedicated provider can take a lot of that pain, a lot of that guessing out of there and give you consistency and reliability um, in your business. And I think as you're starting up, that's critical, right? Because you can't have those
Yeah,
big misses.
definitely. Well, this has been an incredible hour, Eric. I want to thank you so much and our audience members for participating as well. Thank you so much. Feel free, I have a couple minutes here to keep throwing your questions in there, and we'll get those to Werner for them to reach out to you directly. But other than that, I'll send it back to you, Brittany.
Awesome. Well, yes, that is all the time we have for today. Thank you to everyone again for taking the time to listen in, and a big thank you to Eric and Grace for sharing your insights with us today. As a reminder, the recording of this webinar will be sent to everyone tomorrow via the email you used to register with. We hope you'll join us again next time. Thank you.
Thank you.